The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also scheduled to meet Zelensky, the President of Ukraine, during the G7 summit in Hiroshima. This will be their first in-person meeting after the Russia-Ukraine conflict started. Prime Minister Modi and President Zelensky are expected to address the current situation in Ukraine. The talks will also focus on finding diplomatic solutions to the escalating situation. And the G7 summit is underway in Hiroshima in Japan. Leaders of the G7 countries, Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan and the United States held their first plenary session. Before the official meet, the leaders visited the Hiroshima Memorial to pay tributes to victims of the Hiroshima bombing. The three-day meeting is expected to see leaders discuss the year-long Russia-Ukraine war and other global issues. The United States and the rest of the group of 7 major economies have unveiled new sanctions and export controls on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. The conflict in Ukraine will be among the top agendas during the summit. The US officials have said that the new sanctions are aimed at disrupting Russia's ability to get materials it needs for the battlefield. Sanctions will also target Russia's $4 to $4.5 billion annual trade in diamonds. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the French President Emmanuel Macron held bilateral talks on the sidelines of the G7 meet. The two launched a series of initiatives, discussed global crises and also thanked each other for extending cooperation bilaterally and on the world stage.
Nos présidents du G7 d'ailleurs avec
The French President Emmanuel Macron and the Japanese Prime Minister Kishida also met for bilateral talks ahead of the G7 summit. Macron told Kishida that the summit would provide a time for unity on the war in Ukraine. It would also allow leaders to make progress on numerous issues, including energy, climate, artificial intelligence, and the economy. The two sides also emphasized deepening bilateral cooperation. And ahead of the G7 summit in Hiroshima, protesters took to the streets to protest against the G7 leaders' summit and the war in Ukraine. Some in riot gear, protesters marched in the main street in Hiroshima, which is not so far from the Peace Memorial. Protesters said their anger was sparked by a meeting of leaders of several nuclear-armed powers, including the United States, in the city, which was the victim of nuclear bombing in 1945. The China Central Asia Summit got underway with the Chinese President Xi Jinping heading the roundtable meeting in Xi'an. The 5 Central Asian countries will discuss a broad range of issues and also pay attention to building cooperation between the two sides. President Xi announced that China would provide Central Asian countries with a total of $3.8 billion of financing support and grants. The summit is the first major diplomatic activity which China is hosting this year and also the first offline summit between the head of 6 countries. South Africa President Cyril Ramaphosa and his counterparts from 5 African countries are to travel to Moscow and Kyiv in June on a peace mission. The Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also agreed that Ramaphosa and other leaders from Africa will travel to both capitals in Europe. The decision comes after Russia extended the Black Sea grain deal. South Korea is sending a 21-member team of government experts to Japan next week. They will be visiting the Fukushima nuclear power plant, where they will examine Japan's plans to release a treated but slightly radioactive water into the sea. The 6-day visit, starting Sunday, will focus on examining the plant's processing system. The safety of the water has been a sensitive issue between the US allies, who are now working on to repair long-strained ties. Britain is to announce sanctions on Russian diamonds and imports of metals from Russia, including copper, aluminium and nickel. European Council President Charles Michel said Europe would also restrict sales of Russian diamonds. Security measures were in place in and around the Vatican City a day after a man driving a car breached the city-state's gates. The driver moved at high speed through a gate before reaching a central courtyard of the Apostle Palace, where he was arrested. The male driver, described as about 40 years old, was said to be unstable. He was arrested in the courtyard and put in a cell in the Vatican's small jail, where he was examined by the doctors. Three Indian naval ships arrived at Myanmar's Yangon city on Thursday to provide relief material to Myanmar, which has been devastated by the cyclone Mocha. The campaign has been termed as Operation Karuna. The relief material includes items like food, medicine, water pumps, portable generators, clothes and other sanitary and hygiene items. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar announced on Twitter that another ship would be shortly joining the three ships. And Syria's President Bashar al-Assad landed in Saudi Arabia's Jeddah on Thursday. Syria will be participating in the Arab League summit after a gap of 13 years. At the summit, starting today, Assad will meet Arab presidents and kings who for years sought to weaken him. Other Arab leaders, including the Palestinian president and Lebanese Prime Minister, have also arrived at the Saudi city. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol turned down a controversial nursing bill that defined the roles and responsibilities of nurses in the country. The bill, which was heavily pushed by the country's main opposition party, was vetoed on grounds that it causes excessive conflict among medical professionals. Nurses in South Korea have been demanding a separate law that specifies their roles and duties. Currently, the Medical Professionals Act governs all medical professionals in the country. This act states that nurses should carry out medical services under the guidance of doctors. The new Nursing Act stipulates that all citizens are entitled to nursing care at medical institutions and in local communities. The Hamas and the Islamic Jihad officials staged a march in the Gaza Strip in protest against the rally by the Israeli nationalists in Jerusalem. Palestinians called the Jerusalem March a blatant provocation undermining their ties to the city. In recent years, the Jerusalem Day Parade has increasingly become a show of force for Israeli nationalists. Ongoing clashes between farmers and herders in Nigeria have displaced more than 3,000 people and killed at least 85. The violence erupted on Monday in several villages of the Plateau State. Several villages in the Mangu district of the state were caught up in the violence on Thursday, forcing residents to flee. It was unclear what triggered the week's attack in Mangu. Tit-for-tat killings between herders and farmers often spirals into village raids by heavily armed groups. Greece's main opposition leader Alex Tsipras held his main campaign rally in central Athens. During the rally, he called the current government the worst since the junta of the 1960s. He also criticized the military government for not doing enough to tackle inflation, which has plagued the country since the past 1 year. The country will hold parliamentary elections on the 21st of May. A severe wildfire in Spain's western region has caused havoc. As many as 3,700 acres is reported to have been ravaged already. Authorities have ordered evacuation of as many as 550 people. Unusually dry winter and long-drawn drought in Spain has caused severe wildfires in the country. The death toll from floods that devastated an area of northeastern Italy rose to 13 on Thursday. Bodies of 2 people were found in the region, as local media said. The 2 victims were farmers in their 70s who may have been electrocuted while trying to move a fridge inside a flooded house. With 10,000 people already displaced, authorities in the area say an immediate evacuation has been ordered for 3 more villages threatened by floods. Droughts have hit France's Pyrénées-Orientales. The area is fully packed with tree farms, and because of the drought, many farmers are forced to sacrifice some of their harvest. In the most arid part, apricot plantations are getting deprived of water and are drying out. As a result, farmers fear that by the end of the summer there will be no water and the whole orchard will be dead. A 7.7 magnitude earthquake struck in the Pacific Ocean southeast of New Caledonia, triggering a tsunami warning. Police evacuated the coast and tsunami sirens have also been activated. The Tsunami Warning Center warned of a possible smaller tsunami of 0.1 to 1 meters in New Caledonia and Fiji, Kiribati and New Zealand. The tsunami warning was later withdrawn into areas. The spouses of leaders of G7 countries paid respects and laid flowers for the victims of the 1945 atomic bombing in Hiroshima. The Japanese Prime Minister's wife, Yuko, along with her counterparts, observed a moment of silence in front of the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park. Paleontologists in Argentina have discovered remains of a gigantic new species of a long-necked herbivorous dinosaur. At 50 tons and 30 meters in length, the Chuckarosaurus is the largest ever dinosaur discovered in the mountainous region. Around 140 dinosaur species have been discovered in Argentina, ranking it among the top 3 countries for research and discoveries. A Tunisian man has started a pet grooming, mobile beauty and care service, a moving salon for animals. The colourful van roams around the streets of Tunis from one pet to another to provide them with personalised services. Tito's Pet Grooming offers pets a variety of services to improve their health and well-being. At the city centre in Yemen's Sana'a, dozens of women gathered and learnt the art of embroidery, embroidering belts. The belts are traditionally made with intricate designs and often embroidered with gold and silver threads. These are generally handmade, and it's a painstaking task which takes weeks. But recently, these are being made with the use of machines. Prices of a belt can range from $15 to $150. According to a report by the Associated Press, a dozen poor countries are on the verge of collapse under the weight of billions of dollars in foreign loans that they had taken from China. These nations include Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Kenya, Zambia Mongolia and Laos. These countries are using their foreign currency reserves to pay the interest on the loans, eventually taking a hit on their tax revenue, which is needed to keep schools open, provide electricity and pay for food and fuel. The main factor that's driving such turbulence is China's reluctance to forgive the debt and its extreme secrecy about how much money it has loaned and on what terms, which has kept other major lenders from stepping in to help.